Yeah, you can't get too much of Ronald Reagan, can you? All right, our next speaker, now we had to jumble our schedule a little, so this is going to be cool because Ted Cruz's later flight got canceled, so he's promised to fly one of these out of here to his next. I didn't know if you could do that or not, Ted, but I want to see that. This guy is a proven conservative. He's overcome enormous odds. He's been counted out 1,000 times in the race for U.S. Senate, and the guy keeps coming back, much to the chagrin of party establishment and other folks. This guy's overcome everything. He's a great constitutional advocate, a 10th Amendment advocate. He gets it. He understands the Constitution. He understands the restraints of it. This guy worked on our under our great Attorney General Greg Abbott. How many of you know Greg Abbott? An awesome, awesome man. Ted Cruz as well has just been a fighter on behalf of conservative values. We're excited to have him here today. Inspirational story, inspirational speaker. I think maybe you've heard of this guy, Ted Cruz.
Oh, there's a wireless one? All right.
Make sure it's on.
Well, thank you very, very much. Hello? Thank you very, very much. It is great to be here in Midland. It is wonderful to be back with so many dear friends. You know, I have to tell you, the last 3 times I've been out in West Texas, it's rained all 3 times. So we may be revising the campaign slogan to vote for Ted, he'll bring the rain. I'll tell you, there is no place I have loved spending time more than here in West Texas. The values that are here, these are the values that built our country. There's no one in West Texas that's looking for a handout. There's no one in West Texas that is sitting there saying, if only we had a bigger and bigger government. If only we spent more money, and you know what, our national debt isn't quite big enough. You want to know the answer to the problems in this country? We need to get back to West Texas values. The stakes in our country, I think, have never been higher. We're at the edge of a cliff, a fiscal and economic cliff, and we are staring down a long, long way. A few weeks ago, I had the great privilege and honor of speaking in Tampa at the Republican Convention. Thank you. Well, thank you. And, you know, one of the things I talked about is I talked about the national debt, and I talked about our 2 little girls, Caroline and Catherine. When I got back to our hotel room, it was about 1:30 in the morning that night, my wife Heidi and I pulled out my iPhone and started looking at Twitter. And the comedian Paula Poundstone, who I don't know, but it seems she was watching the convention that night, and she sent a tweet. And the tweet she sent said, Ted Cruz just said when his daughter was born, the national debt was $10 trillion. Now it's $16 trillion. What the heck did she do? And Heidi and I got a very good laugh at that. But, you know, it really underscores. Our oldest daughter, Caroline, is 4. In the 4 short years she has been on this planet, our national debt has gone from $10 trillion to $16 trillion. That is a 60% increase. It is larger than our gross domestic product. We are galloping down the road to bankrupting our country. But you know, one of the great blessings we have is we have the blessing of foreshadowing. We can look across the Atlantic. We can look at Greece. We can look at Italy. We can look at Europe, Spain. And we can see where this road we're on ends. As Margaret Thatcher famously put it, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. We can see exactly where this road goes. You know, it's interesting, since our primary victor, I've had the chance to talk to quite a few folks in the mainstream media. It's a little bit like swimming with piranhas, except not nearly as pleasant. But more than a few of them have asked questions, say, well, you're one of those conservative Tea Party types. You're radical and extreme. And I have to admit, I just laugh at that. I just laugh and say, you know, it is only in this strange bubble that is the Washington, D.C. Beltway that it is considered extreme not to want to bankrupt our country. In the rest of America, living within your means is simple common sense. If any one of us ran our businesses or our families the way the federal government is run, we'd be sleeping under a bridge. But let me tell you something. It is so easy to watch TV, to read the papers, and to be depressed and demoralized. If you hear nothing else this afternoon, I am here today with a word. So did somebody put Eric Holder in charge of the microphone? Now, Harry Reid would just do nothing. Eric Holder would affirmatively mess it up. I got to stop for a second. Before the word of encouragement and exhortation, you got me going on Eric Holder. We have an attorney general who is on video saying he wants to, quote, brainwash Americans to hate guns. Hello? There we go. He wants to brainwash Americans to hate guns. That's on video, the Attorney General of the United States. The Attorney General of the United States, under his leadership in Fast and Furious, the U.S. government deliberately, willingly sold guns to Mexican drug cartels that were used to murder at least 2 federal law enforcement officers and untold hundreds of civilians. Now, you can't make this stuff up. You know, Evans, if you and I started running guns to Mexican drug cartels, they'd throw us in jail. This is the chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America. The stakes cannot be higher. I see this gentleman here wearing an Atlas Shrugged shirt. 2 Atlas Shrugged shirts. We are living in the days of Atlas Shrugged. We are watching it right now. One of the terrific things in Atlas Shrugged is Ayn Rand talks about how the parasitical class, the politicians, although I repeat myself, enact arbitrary, standardless regimes that forces the productive citizens of society to come on bended knee, seeking a special dispensation, seeking grace and arbitrary benefits. That's exactly the world we're living in now. Does anyone think it's a coincidence that half of the waivers from Obamacare came in Nancy Pelosi's district? You look at a bill like Dodd-Frank. Talk about a bill you don't need to read any further than the title to know nothing good can come of it. We are facing the greatest explosion of government spending, government power, and government debt our nation has ever seen. And yet, I am incredibly optimistic. The word of encouragement, the word of exhortation I wanted to share is we are seeing a great awakening sweeping this state and sweeping this country. Millions and millions of Americans are standing up saying we want our country back. It is breathtaking. I'll tell you, I consider myself so incredibly fortunate to have spent the last year and a half crisscrossing this great state every single day. People sometimes ask, well, is it tiring campaigning? And I tell them, are you kidding me? Everywhere I go, I get to see people passionate, on fire for turning our country around. How can you not be inspired by the passion that has been awakened? And we shouldn't be surprised that the American people are standing up for liberty. Indeed, I want to tell you a love story. It is a love story with freedom that is the legacy of this great nation. It began with our founding fathers, who crafted the most miraculous document ever conceived, our Constitution. Who understood the revolutionary idea that our rights don't come from kings and monarchs by grace. Our rights come from God. And our Constitution served, as Thomas Jefferson put it, as chains to bind the mischief of government and to secure our God-given rights. This love story continued with the Texians in the city of Gonzales, when General Santa Anna demanded that they hand over their guns and hand over the cannon that guarded the city. They responded with the immortal cry, "Come and take it." It continued with the greatest generation, who rose up to confront the grotesque evil that was the Nazis and ushered in the greatest era of peace and prosperity that the world has ever seen. It continued with the civil rights heroes and pioneers who stood up to the scourge of racism and who championed the principle, as Dr. Martin Luther King put it, that each of us must be judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. It continued with President Ronald Reagan, who stood against the creeping growth of government and stood tall against the evil empire, having the courage to speak the most important words uttered by a leader in the modern times. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. It's the story of each and every one of us. You know, for all of us, freedom is not some abstract thing we read about in a magazine or a book. Freedom is our lives, it's our families, it's our experience. For me, my mom, Irish and Italian, from Wilmington, Delaware, born into a working class family. Her mother was the second youngest of 17 kids. They were Irish Catholic. They didn't know what else to do on a Saturday night. She became the first in her family ever to go to college, graduating from Rice in 1956 with a degree in math and becoming a pioneering computer programmer. Or my dad, born in Cuba, fought in the Cuban Revolution as a kid, thrown in prison and tortured, beaten almost to death. He came to Texas in 1957 with nothing but $100 sewn into his underwear and a passion for freedom. He washed dishes to pay his way through the University of Texas and to start a small business in the oil and gas industry. It's a story of each and every one of us. You know, I've told my dad's story thousands of times. My dad is my hero. He has also toured the state the last 8-9 months, speaking on behalf of the campaign. I cannot tell you how many Republican women have told me, Ted, we like you fine. We love your dad. My dad's been my hero my whole life, but you know what I find most incredible about his story? How commonplace it is. Every one of us here has a story just like that. That's the story of America. Every one of us, our ancestors, fled oppression, risked everything for freedom. We could bring the microphone across this hangar and every person could stand up and tell the story, either their story or their parents or their great-great-great-grandparents. The most fundamental DNA of what it means to be an American is to value freedom and opportunity above all else. And that is why this country is rising up so powerfully against what's happening in Washington. Because we love freedom. I got to tell you, the current president, I think, is genuinely astonished that the American people aren't celebrating. I don't know how many of you saw about a year ago, there was a press conference where he was there, and he was talking, and he said, why aren't you thanking me? And he was genuinely confused and befuddled. And if you think about it, much of Europe willingly took the yoke of socialism. Said, we will give up our liberty in exchange for an omnipresent government that controls our economy and provides for our needs. The president effectively said, listen, I'm bringing you bread and circuses. And the incredible thing is the American people understand that when the government takes over the economy, what goes away is the freedom and opportunity that is the foundation of this country. I want to close with a couple of points. One in particular is a story that my father tells quite frequently. My father's a pastor now north of Dallas. And he tells a story about a tightrope walker who erects a rope across a gigantic waterfall. The crowd gathers around to see him. And he asks the crowd, he says, "How many of you believe I can walk across this rope and back?" And the crowd cheers. And he does it. He says, "How many of you believe I can walk across this rope and back pushing a wheelbarrow?" The crowd cheers. And he does it. He says, "How many of you believe I can walk across this rope and back pushing a wheelbarrow with two 100-pound bags of sand in the wheelbarrow?" The crowd cheers. And he does it. He says, "How many of you believe I can walk across this rope and back pushing a wheelbarrow with a man in the wheelbarrow?" The crowd cheers. And he points to a man in the front row and says, "Get in the wheelbarrow." Now, my father tells that story in the context of salvation. That believing is not simply quietly applauding pitter-pat. Believing is getting in the wheelbarrow. It is putting your heart, your soul, your might, everything you have, getting in the wheelbarrow. And the same is true about believing in freedom. What is happening right now, if you read the polls, if you read the news, anyone noticed that the media is rooting for a certain outcome in November? I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to guess that I'm not the only person here who in the last year has yelled at your television set. I will confess I am a TV yeller. If you have turned to your husband or wife, if you have said, "Dear God, if we don't stop what's happening, we're going to lose this country." That's what's happening right now. Let me tell you the passion. We are 38 days away from Election Day. Every cycle, you get a bunch of politicians that run around on stages and say, "This is the most important election in the history of the universe." Let me tell you, this is the most important election we've ever had. There is no more critical choice in this country than that we defeat President Barack Obama in November. And we need to retire Harry Reid as Majority Leader in the Senate. Now, I'll tell you, my friend Tim Macy and Gun Owners of America, they are doing a tremendous job fighting on the ground. Gun Owners of America, they don't wait till the fight is over and join the victory parade. They get in and fight the fight. They endorsed me in this primary early on, when you had to be nuts to be supporting me. That's why I love West Texas, because there are a whole lot of people out here who are nuts. And I say that with as much fondness as my heart can muster. We have got to stand up and turn things around. And I want to end with a very simple challenge to each and every one of you. If you agree the stakes are as enormous as I feel confident you do, the challenge I want to give to each of you is that in 39 days, on the day after the election, that you will be able to look in the mirror and say to yourself, self, I did everything I humanly could to turn this country around. We have 38 days, not 39, not 40, not 41, 38 days. I ask every one of you to do everything humanly within your power. Knock on doors, make phone calls, get on Facebook, give money. Give money to any fight that matters. They wouldn't let me in the politician club if I didn't say give money to me. But give money in the presidential race. Give money in key battleground Senate races. Get on a plane and fly to Ohio. Fly to Florida. Fly to Virginia. Make sure that in 39 days you can stand tall and say, I stood up and answered the call to pull our country back. I will tell you something. When we started this race for U.S. Senate now nearly 2 years ago, I was quite literally at 2% in the polls. And the margin of error was 3%. Which, if my math holds, means technically I could have been at negative 1%. It has been the singular honor of my life to stand shoulder to shoulder with each of you. Very much like standing shoulder to shoulder with the Patriots at Lexington and Concord, at the Alamo, in Gonzales, standing shoulder to shoulder with President Reagan in front of the Brandenburg Gate. For centuries, Americans have risen up to answer the call to defend freedom. And it is my singular honor to stand with each of you as we do it today. We do it together. Together, we will restore that shining city on a hill that is the United States of America. Thank you, and God bless you.